My name is Will. One of the first things most people learn about me is I like birds. I spend most of my weekends or free time out in the park with binoculars looking for birds or taking photos of birds around my neighborhood. Friends and family send me photos of birds that they see to ask for help with identification, and I'm usually the first person they reach out to whenever there's something birdie in the news. I even have an Instagram page dedicated to all things bird. So, yeah, you could say I like birds, but it wasn't always like that. Growing up, I was an animal kid. It started with dinosaurs. I know, cliche. I wanted to be a paleontologist. I'd travel the world, find awesome dinosaur bones, and piece them together into these ancient monsters. I kind of had it in my head like paleontologists were Indiana Jones, but I don't know. That dream didn't last too long after I discovered an even greater passion: cats. Anyway, I digress. I always loved animals, and I couldn't get enough of them, except for birds. I never really cared for them. I thought birds were kind of plain and boring, and they were all over the place, so they weren't special. Of course, I liked penguins, and owls were pretty cool, but quote unquote normal birds couldn't care less. Well, that all changed when I saw a very special crow in Seattle. Well into adulthood, I was walking around Green Lake Park in Seattle, which is this great lush space in the middle of the city with a lake and some forested area. While I was walking around the park with a friend, a crow caught my eye. This crow had red on both of its wings. I had to double take because what? A crow with red on its wings? So we went back and sure enough, we saw it and I got a good long look at this really cool creature that I thought was some sort of rare new thing. Maybe it was a mutation or the government had messed up with their drone printing program and this robot looked a little different from the other ones. That was a joke, by the way. Birds are real. Anyway, I was enchanted. All of my friends and family that I could find, I had to tell them about this really cool bird that I saw. Most of them were kind of surprised to hear me talking about birds since I'm usually the cat person or whatever else. But they just said, that's awesome. And we moved on with our lives. Until I ran into an acquaintance that told me what I saw wasn't a crow with red on its wings. It was a red-winged blackbird. Upon hearing that, my entire world was essentially turned upside down. How could this really cool bird be hanging out in Seattle and I had no idea about it? So I asked for more info, and it turns out red-winged blackbirds are one of the most common birds in America. So again, I'm floored, and I was determined to go see this bird again. So I went back to the park, and sure enough, I found not one, but many red-winged blackbirds. The rest of the trip at the park, I had my eyes open and up, looking for any bird that I could find. Because if the red-winged blackbird was so common, and I'm only just now seeing it well into my 20s, what else am I missing out on? So from that day on, every time I walked to the bus stop or even to a lunch spot, I was always looking for birds. A lot of the birds that I saw were considered fairly common, but I was impressed with really everything that I saw around me. From sparrows to hummingbirds, I was just shocked at the variety and beauty in these small creatures. So I started earnestly going out on my weekends or even after work some days during the summer just to look for birds. And at first, I'll admit, this was kind of crazy for me because I spent my whole life not caring about them. And now I felt like this veil was lifted over my eyes and I could finally see all these cool things. So I went to Goodwill and I picked up a cheap $3 Puget Sound bird book, which could conveniently fit in my pocket, and began to study these birds that I was seeing. And it was just such an overwhelming joy to be able to engage with this hobby that I found just from seeing a crow, or at least what I thought was a crow, fly by my head. And from there, the rest is, as they say, history. One of my favorite things to do is to share my enthusiasm for birds with anyone willing to receive it. All of this enthusiasm came from me seeing what I believe to be a crow, a very common critter. With Will's Birdbrain, I want to spotlight these unsung beauties of the bird world, birds people may cross paths with every day and not think twice about. These creatures have an amazing story to tell, and I want to share it. We'll discuss history, birds' relationships with people, share a myth or two about where these birds came from and their impact on culture, and end off with a number of crazy cool facts about these common critters. So thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to fly together.